Hey, team, you ever have those days where sometimes you're super confident, you feel like you can take on the world and you're in a great zone, and then other days you're in a certain situation or a circumstance and your confidence leaves you? We've all been there, by the way, and that's why I'm so excited to speak with today's guest. Today's guest is Margo McClimans, and she's the founder of a company called Coaching Without Borders. She's been a certified executive coach for well over 2 decades. And she's also written an amazing book called The Four Channels of Confidence: How to Cultivate and Radiate Self-Assurance. And I had a chance to read this book, a couple of weeks before we did the podcast. Fantastic book. Simple, straightforward, powerful. Great example of the Mark Twain quote where he said, "Hey, I wrote you a long letter. If I took more time, I could have written you a short letter." Margo's written us the powerful short letter. She's taken the time to do that editing. And in today's podcast, we talk about those four channels of confidence. After defining really what confidence is, we get into the four channels of confidence. And the channels are the breath channel, the attitude channel, the voice channel, and the body channel. And these are things that we can all think about intentionally to ensure we're in our best self, to be as confident as we can be. She then talks about multiplying your confidence through relationships and developing an action plan for moving forward. It's really a great conversation. And frankly, at the beginning of the book, Margo speaks to writing the book for women. But the reality of it is, I think this book is universal. We all have these challenges, and her coaching programs are for everybody. So I think everybody's going to get value from today's conversation and today's book. And if you do get value out of today, folks, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast, because that really matters to us. That's in fact how we get really good guests like Margo. And thanks for doing so, by the way. So enjoy today's podcast. Here's Margo McClimans. Hey, Margo, welcome to the Selling Well podcast. It's great to see you on a podcast. We've met before, but it's great to see you on this podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to chat today because certainly I really love the four channels of confidence: how to cultivate and radiate self-assurance. And one of the things that sort of dawned on me when I was reading this book, two things. I think first of all, it's a great example of the Mark Twain quote that says, "Hey, I wrote you a long letter. If I had more time, I would have written you a short letter." So I love these books where people actually take that time to do the hard editing. It's not easy, but it's really tough. But all the meat, it's all absolute gold in here. And as you mentioned in the book, it's kind of a great weekend read.
That's the idea. Or a plane, I'm imagining people getting on an airplane ride, a domestic or European flight. You should be able to finish it.
You would. And although you talk to, the book's directed towards women, one of the things that dawned on me is how much I would have benefited from this book with the exact content very early in my career. Because again, I think confidence is a challenge there, or imposter syndrome is a real challenge early in your career, depending upon what you've done. So we've got lots of stuff to unpack in this amazing book here today. But maybe just to start for the listeners, maybe you share the short story of your professional journey that kind of got you here.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's see. I started actually in the marble and granite import and export business. So as an entrepreneur, that was my first company. It was called International Stone Consultancy.
Oh.
And I got into that industry because I was hired as a buyer for a stone company in California because I speak Italian. So my main qualification was to speak Italian, so I could reach out to the suppliers in Italy and import their stone to suppliers all over the world, but mostly Italy. Then I realized at a certain point, I remember sitting on my back porch in Palo Alto, California, and thinking, oh, God, I really want to be my own boss. I want to have, when I was that buyer for that company, I want to be my own boss. I want to have my own business. And I love the stone business, but I also have lived in all these different countries. And when I've had intercultural training, it was so important to me and made my experience so much better. And I thought, but how can I, walk down the street to Hewlett Packard and knock on the door and say, I'd like to help train your leaders to work internationally? Why would they hire me? I thought, okay, so I have some work to do. So I went and got my MBA in Italy. And while I was there, while I was there, I realized, okay, I actually have a good thing going with the stone business. So I actually started with international stone consultancy there, always with the dream in the back of my mind, one day I want to be an intercultural trainer. And then a couple years after I finished my MBA, and I was working at a local software company, ironically, working in California, Silicon Valley for
There's
stone
lots of them
business.
there. Yeah,
And
lots of
then
them there.
then I moved to Italy, where it's famous for stone, and worked for a software company. A little backwards, but nevertheless, I was working there, and the MBA director approached me and he said, "Hey, this is 2005. I want to start a leadership training for the MBA students, and I want to have certified coaches, and I think you would be a great coach." And I
Wow.
said, "What's a coach?" It wasn't like nowadays when there's so many coaches. And as he explained it to me, I
Yeah.
connected to my dream about intercultural training, and I saw the connection. And that's really how I got my start. This person believed in me. I got very lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. And he was right. I found coaching is really my thing. I really found my thing with that. So that's a little clip of the story. And I've been coaching ever since. So the last almost 20 years now.
How interesting, by the way. Thanks for that. And then how interesting when you think back to 2005. In those days, I was still in the corporate world running large sales organizations. And I remember there was almost a stigma to coaching back then because it was almost like, if you were an executive and you had an outside coach, it was because there was a problem.
Right.
So it wasn't, the way it is now where everybody invests in their future. We understand the importance of coaching. It was a little different then when they said, "Hey, you need some, professional development." And even thinking of it those ways, it was very much a fixed mindset, saying if you
Right.
need to get better, it means you're not good enough now. And so, in one sense, it was positive in the corporate world because they were investing in you. And then in the
Mhm.
other sense, it was, oh, it's a bit of a problem because,
Well,
if you need some outside help, there's a bit of a problem here.
I wish I could say it's completely different now. Some industries, it's still the case where there's a bit of a stigma. I do have some clients who wear coaching like a badge of honor. I have a coach, and
Yeah,
other clients who say, I'd rather not give a
sure.
testimonial with my name or whatever it is. And it's true that in some organizations more than others, they are investing in their top talent and giving them coaching. And some industries, I still get requests where they say, "Look, we have this problematic person. We're about to fire them. Can you either fix them, or at
Yeah,
least if you can't, we can say we tried everything, and we even sent them to a coach, and so now we can, get rid
yeah.
of them." And I don't accept that work. I really say no,
Good for
thank you. I
you.
don't feel ethically. I don't feel okay taking money in a situation like that. They need to invest in the people that they want to keep around.
Yeah, great approach and good for you. And by the way, we met, for the listeners, we met in a coaching program. We met in
Right.
Strategic Coach. That's why we're here. Tell the listeners where you are today.
Yeah, I'm based here in Zurich, Switzerland. I've been living here since 2010, but as you can tell from my accent, I'm American, and I'm from Columbus, Ohio, actually Midwesterner. So have a lot of affinity also with Canadians. This whole Great Lake region, I think there's a lot of affinity between us, more so than even for some of my countrymen a little bit further away.
I've always
But yeah,
felt that. Yeah.
right. And we know how to play euchre.
You know how to play euchre and you also know how to play hockey.
And yes, floor hockey. And where I grew up, it was floor hockey, my favorite sport.
Floor hockey is actually one of my favorite sports in life. I'm a hockey fanatic.
Still, oh,
And
good.
but I that was because as a kid growing up in Canada, the only thing we had to do was play ball hockey outside. So
Okay, yeah.
and we just the 10,000 hour. I had the 10,000 hours by the age of
Wow.
8.
Oh
But
no, I loved it. It was my favorite sport in gym class. Nowadays, I'm a tennis player. I've been playing. I also started
nice.
playing when I was a kid, and I keep that up. Lessons once a week. Speaking of getting coaching, I still get tennis coaching every week.
Well, that's kind of this interesting thing. I'd like to just touch on coaching for a second here because, I look at what we do, what I do. I've got a fitness coach, so I think I'm in okay shape, but I still want to learn the best techniques and approaches. I perform better when somebody's watching me. When you're doing your 8 reps, 9 reps, you tank out at 7 if you're on your own. Somebody's watching, you squeeze it out. Uh,
Magically.
I'm a drummer in a bar
Oh,
band just for fun.
awesome.
And the number of times, Margot, that and we have these videos and all this kind of stuff, and people come to show, and I'll tell people I take drum lessons, and they go, "Why? Like, if you're good
Right.
enough to play in a bar band, why would you take drum lessons?" And the answer for me, the question's so foreign because the
Yeah,
answer to me is so obvious. I want to get better. I want to get better
always get
actually at
better.
everything,
Right.
so
Especially
that's
the
why.
things that you love, right? Why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah. And you're a certified coach. And tell me
Mhm.
how you would define coaching.
That's, I'm glad you bring it up because when we do a coaching for managers program, because we also do trainings, right?
Yeah.
And we bring a group of managers in the room and we start to tell them, hey, you know what, coaching might be a good tool in your toolkit as a manager. We spend a fair amount of time invest a fair amount of time in explaining what is coaching, because what I do is very different than what my tennis coach does, right? It is
Mhm.
different than, so there's a lot of overlap between like coaching, mentoring. There's also some overlap into therapy. That's also a kind of delicate topic too. People say, well, I don't want therapy, or I do want therapy, or, what's the
I
difference?
probably need a
So
fair amount of that, but we're going to have to do another podcast for that, and it's going to be 13 hours long. So
very
let's
good.
hold off on the therapy for now, but get the point.
Yeah, there's overlap in all of those, what's the difference? Coaching, consulting, mentoring. Let's just start with that. So basically in every one of those cases, you have a person who cares about you, who wants to understand your challenges, who wants to help you find answers, who wants you to walk out in a better situation than you started in. That's the case for all three: coaching, mentoring, consulting. The difference between, for example, coaching and mentoring and consulting is the coach does not need to have any sort of overlap in background. So,
Hmm.
technical background, not needed, because a coach, a certified coach through the International Coaching Federation, or there's other certifying bodies, it's about helping people find their own answers through questions, through great listening. Of
Yeah.
course, if I understand more about your industry, that's great, because you can connect with people, you can relate. People want to feel like you understand their challenges. That's the most important thing. So great if you have that information, but I don't have to. Whereas a mentor or a consultant has to have, an overlap in their background, or an expertise in that area in order
Yes.
to provide the advice that the person's looking for. So I could coach an astronaut, but I could never mentor an astronaut.
Right.
I don't know what that big red button does, right? That would be
Right.
dangerous. So that's one really important distinction that we make. And the one between coaching and therapy is also kind of, that's part of our certification process. That's one of the reasons why I think it's important to work with a certified coach, is that we learn what is the line. Like, when do we need to start suggesting, maybe this is a topic for therapy? Because coaching is about the whole person and their whole life. It's not just their professional
Hmm.
life. My clients are welcome to bring in personal topics. We can even talk about their past if that's relevant for today. If it's affecting them today, then that's relevant, and that's perfectly fine. But what I'm not going to do is make a diagnosis. I'm not going to give them a label of a syndrome of something of that kind. And if I sense that there's any sort of, depression, dangerous tendencies toward themselves or somebody else, that's absolutely not the territory of a coach, and that absolutely should be referred to a therapist.
Thank you, by the way. And then, without going too far down, this tangent, but just thinking about it. So when we think of most managers today out there, or we could use other examples, but most business managers who are leaders, they're doing some form of inspection, some form of motivation, and some form of coaching. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
really what it takes to lead a team. But and by the way, one of those key things you shared is they actually need to care about the team and understand the team to be helpful at coaching. And that's an
Right.
issue at some point in time because some managers just think of members of the team as tools for them to achieve their goals instead of understanding, it's all about the team, the player, not the coach.
Right.
But when we start to think of those things, and or even in the sports world, where my fitness trainer's coach is doing a little bit of coaching and a little bit of training, but she does know more about the
Yeah,
space
there's
than
some
me.
consulting in there, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So it's an interesting set of definitions there for us to process. But
Yeah.
if we circle back now, so we've talked about coaching and the book you've written, by the way, congratulations, 10-year anniversary. So it was originally
Yeah.
written in 2014. We've got a second printing, I guess, now.
Yep.
The Four Channels of Confidence, How to Cultivate and Radiate Self-Assurance. Before we talk about the stages of confidence, Maybe
Mhm.
let's do that. Let's define confidence. And then secondly, let's explain why you targeted this book at women specifically.
Yeah, great. Confidence for me, it's really important that we distinguish it from arrogance or feeling like you're better than
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah.
Confidence is purely about being comfortable in your own skin, about not needing to prove yourself. And it's not about never being afraid either. You've heard the expression, feel the fear and do it anyway. I
Yeah.
think confidence is really a choice. At a certain point, you can, I think I shared that in the book, a story. Sometimes maybe I had on a super elegant dress or something that I felt a little bit insecure in. And I said, you know what? I'm going to decide to be confident and put my shoulders back and walk into that room as if I look good. I'm going to decide I look good, damn it. And I'm going to feel confident. Sometimes that's what it takes, right? It's a choice to be confident.
Hmm.
And it's scary. It's not about not being afraid, but also confidence is like I really believe that we're born with confidence. I think that every single one of us was born confident. None of us doubted ourselves when it came time to learn how to walk, right? We were,
Hmm.
we
You
were
kept
really,
trying. You just kept
we
trying.
kept trying. You don't doubt yourself as a toddler, right? I think we learn to not be confident at some point. And so the book is all about helping people rediscover their own innate confidence.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily, and another assumption people make, they, oh, I don't want to get too confident because I'll come across as arrogant. Another assumption they make is, well, I'm an introvert. I don't want to become an extrovert. You don't have to be an extrovert. In fact, the most confident people are usually some of the quietest people. They don't feel the need to talk or to speak louder or
Yeah.
talk over others, right? They're just totally chill.
Yeah.
So nothing about introversion, extroversion, nothing about arrogance. It's really just cool, calm, collected.
Well, you sense those people. Sometimes we call them comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah,
And you come
exactly.
across, and they don't have to fill the room, and they don't have to
Right.
fill the air. They're not, filling the air. It's not all about them. It seems to me some of the most confident people I've ever come across are the ones where, when you're interacting with them, they actually make you feel like the smartest person in the room. They're
Yeah.
not trying to convince you that they're the smartest person in the room.
Or one up you or anything else.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
So in the
Yeah.
beginning of the book, you share a very alarming stat, and I don't know if this stat got updated, Margot, with the 20 the later versions, but the stat was that globally, it's only 29% of leadership positions are filled by women today versus men,
Right. That
and
was updated.
yeah, that was updated. So that's kind of a current stat, and the reference to government positions and so forth, the stats are even worse. But
Mm.
this actually, to me, this is an issue actually in B2B professional sales as well, particularly mature B2B professional salespeople. The gender diversity is not there at all.
Mm.
And so this is kind of an alarming stat. And it is that stat, because it's so early in the book, is that one of the driving factors that said, "Hey, I'm writing this book's a book by a woman for women."
Yeah, that was absolutely one of the driving factors, if that is even a factor, because who am I to say that the
The
figures have to do
confidence.
with those women's confidence? Not
Yeah,
necessarily, right? I actually find it a really fascinating topic about those statistics and how many different factors play into that. And it's not at all about, fixing the women. It's not their fault. It's a systemic thing, right? And I think nevertheless it makes it harder to be confident when you're the only woman in the room.
for sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And not just the only woman. When you're the only fill in the blank
Anything.
in the room,
Yeah.
it makes it harder to maintain your confidence. So that's what I had in mind when I was writing it. That's I was thinking, you know what? I want to help those, especially women, but definitely also men, really feel comfortable in their own skin, even when they're the only blank in the room. And also, quite frankly, I believe that women are much more likely to go out and buy a book about confidence than a
Ah,
man. I
how
mean,
about that?
I'll be honest, that was also part of it. It's like, look, I am a woman. That's my perspective. That's also a good reason to write, to talk to women as I'm writing it. But also I think that, although confidence issues hit men and women probably equally, I think that women are much more likely to say, you know what? I think I'm going to go out and read something about this. I want to get some help from the outside here.
Yeah. So interesting. By the way, thanks for sharing that. I mean, thanks for your honesty and transparency about, hey, the marketing component of this
That's part of
actually
it.
matters. It is funny. One of the things you bring up in the book, and again, these are a little dated, but I think I went through the first gender diversity training ever for me anyway. The first portion was around 2005 when you were starting to get into this. And it was pretty basic stuff, but there were a few exercises that were kind of shocking.
Hmm.
The way they, and about these preconceived notions and these
The
biases that we
biases.
have.
Yeah.
Daniel
Yeah.
Kahneman and
Oh, yeah.
Oleg with thinking fast and slow. There's 135 different mental shortcuts we all take. The confirmation, the biases. It's
Yep.
amazing. I have every one of them. Like when I read that book,
Sure. We all
it's
do.
just
Yep.
shocking that hey,
Yep.
I've done this, I've done this. But one of the things that jumped out was oftentimes in a meeting, particularly, and I could see this in the corporate world, you'd walk into a meeting, and I think you referenced in the book, the men walk in going, I'm going to show these people what I know. I really deserve to be here. I might be the smartest person in this room. Whereas women are walking in going, I don't know if I deserve to be here.
Yeah, I hope I wasn't quite that black and white in the book because, like I said, I do think that men and women equally have
These
doubts in their
confidence issues.
confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. That being said, I have met personally many more men who would be like, what's the big deal? Why are you doubting yourself? Like that,
Yeah.
I think that those unconscious biases do impact the women more. So, and I think, like you said, it's just we all suffer from these unconscious biases, whether we're a man or a woman, right? If you've taken the implicit association test from the Harvard group, have you heard about this?
No.
Oh, it's really fascinating. Anybody can go. It's free of charge. Implicit association test, IAT. You can go in and test your own bias.
Oh,
And you can test your gender bias. You can test racial bias, ability, disability bias, all sorts of categories. I think there's like 12 different categories or more. And the way that they measure it is they show you two things on the screen. And when something is matching what they say, you hit a certain key. And when it's not matching what they say, you hit another key. So, for example, they have like women and children and or men and children, and you have to answer, and they judge the time it takes your brain to say no, that's actually, it can be a man and a child, yes, but that takes your brain longer than if it's a woman and a child. And
ah.
it's microseconds difference, but it shows, yeah, there's a little bias in there. And I run this with a lot of the groups that I work with, especially on female leadership programs, female groups, and I mean, 90% of the people in the room said, yep, got the bias, right? So
So
it's there.
it's all there. And actually, again, back to the women in sales conference, which is why I was so interested today.
Yeah.
We've had Lori Richardson. There are a couple of folks. There's an organization called Women Sales Pros.
Okay.
And so because of, I think, the lack of gender diversity in professional B2B sales, which is changing, a lot of the younger teams I'm working with have much better gender diversity. But there's a group called Women Sales Pros, and they're all amazing. I think I've had about 6 or 7 of these women on the show, super successful in B2B sales. Many of them are authors. I think it's led by Lori Richardson, who's been on the show.
Okay. Great.
And it really interesting to unpack some of these topics. But if we go back to this confidence, because as you say, Margo, as I was reading this, many of these things absolutely apply to me. So I think it's
Sure.
universal in terms of these elements of, hey, how do we help protect our confidence?
Yeah.
And that's a big theme, by the way, of the coaching program you and I are in. We
Yes.
met each
Yes.
other.
Which is one of the reasons why I love it.
Yeah, strategic coach. That
Yeah.
was the first place I ever heard this idea of protecting your confidence.
Hmm.
And up to that, even with sports and all these other things and the business and everything, I always thought that, hey, I had to earn, the right.
Oh, yeah.
So if it was a bad client or something of that nature that was stealing confidence or a bad leader I had, it's my fault and I've got to earn it. And instead they go, no, you got to protect your confidence. You got to be around people,
Right.
and
Yep. It's an asset.
it's an asset and, it's a mindset too, as you say. So in the book, you do a really deep dive on 4 channels,
Hmm.
that help in this regard: the breath channel, the attitude channel, the voice channel, and the body channel. And I think the advice is so crisp, clear, and simple. Let's unpack a few of those,
Sure.
each of those, and talk a little bit, starting with the breath channel. And I'm going to call out right off the top. I don't know if you've read this book.
I have. Yeah, it's a great
Yeah,
book.
it's just such a wild book.
I taped my mouth. I taped my mouth
No
for
way.
while I was sleeping. I did it. Yeah.
Oh my good. Did you really? And then
Yeah.
were you able to sleep?
Yeah, I sleep now. Yeah, I put the tape in the middle. So the one of the big things in the book, if you haven't read it, is the importance of nose breathing and not mouth breathing. So if you put a little bit of medical tape that's not too sticky in the middle of your mouth, you can still breathe if you have to from the sides, but it trains you to sleep with your mouth closed. And now I wake up in the morning with a closed mouth, and it was fine.
Wow. So, team, we're talking about the book Breath by James Nestor, The New Science of a Lost Art. Just unbelievably interesting book about the importance of breathing. James is one of 5 people I can't get on my show. I'm going to do it. So, but,
Good.
there's only been about 5 people I've ever gone after that didn't join the show. And,
Huh.
and I've been found a path to James, but I'll get him. But
Great.
let's talk about, what you do is provide some very simple tips on the breath side of things and the importance side of things. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of breath.
Great.
Maybe the cooling breath and then the rapid clearing breath is just 2
Mhm.
examples and why we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. And I'd like to add, before we dive in there, why I chose the word channels, because, I could have said the
Please.
4 elements or the 4 corners or the 4 points,
Yeah.
but I chose channels because I really feel like these are 4 ways that both we can increase our sense of confidence, but also that we project it. So it's kind of a two-way street. It's a channel of confidence. And it's true if you think about it, especially when you're listening to somebody speak on stage. If you think of, let's just pause on the breath one. You notice when people are nervous because they're out of breath. You're like, they can't catch their breath.
Yes.
That
Yes.
you're right. That's showing it. And at the same time, I mean, if you just take a deep breath right now, especially if you make the exhale longer than the inhale, what you're doing is slowing down your heart rate. That calms you down. When you calm your brain down, you're able to access more of your creativity, more of your
Yeah.
intelligence, which of course makes us feel more confident. When we
Yes.
feel like under pressure, shocked by a question, or we get a scary question, a scary situation, we can't even access all of the wisdom and knowledge and creativity that we have because our brain is under threat. It's thinking fight or flight right now. So
Exactly.
that's where these breathing techniques come in. Exactly.
Well, that fight or flight
Yeah.
is such a good example, Margo, and we've all lived this, right? Everybody listening, where you might have been in an emotional argument with somebody, and then it ends, and you're driving home, and you think of 3 other data points you forgot to bring up that would have totally
Right.
won you the argument.
Oh, I should have said that.
And there's a physiological reason why, because of the fight or
Yeah.
flight, as humans, the evolution, as soon as we're in that panic or that emotional state, the blood is not in our brain. It's
Mhm.
literally in our extremities because we think we might have to take off,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
The brain is doing us a favor. It actually blocks the functioning of the prefrontal cortex. Things like the adrenaline, it does that on purpose because it says, look, this is no time to make a strategic plan. Just get the hell out of there. Don't think, just do, right? And
Yeah,
so that was a survival thing when we had saber-toothed tigers coming after us. But if you're
right.
standing in front of a boardroom, not very convenient to not be able to
Yes.
think.
Yeah, love that. I'm always amazed personally at the impact of breathing on me because I do meditate. It's just
Great.
Peloton meditation. I haven't gone through a transcendental meditation
Whatever it
course.
is.
But
Yeah.
my goodness, the impact of 10 minutes of focused breathing. I'll
Mm.
walk into meditation like that and then, feeling like, boy, I got a hit list. I have so much work to do. I come out of that meditation going, I'm going to have a great day. I get to do this work. What a joy to
Yes.
actually be on a
Oh,
podcast like this.
right.
Total mindset shift, even to the extent, my wife Donna, she's noticed it. It can
Wow.
really just change your state. It's so powerful. But I love the tips of trying to do that in the moment. That's really hard. You're in
That's
the
when
boardroom.
that's when it counts. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
in the boardroom. So you mentioned the cooling breath. I think you've probably experienced, we've all experienced how emotions can be contagious,
Yes.
right? If somebody starts losing their temper and raising their voice, your own heart starts racing. And you can be sure that that person who's yelling and screaming also has blood pressure through the roof. And so the cooling breath, and this is something that I learned from Sharon Melnick's book about success under pressure. I can also recommend that one. She talks about a cooling
What's
breath,
the title
which,
of, that's what it's called?
yeah,
Success Under Pressure?
success under
Thank you.
pressure.
Thank you.
We can double check afterwards, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Sharon Melnick, that's for sure.
Okay.
And she talks about if you breathe in through your mouth, especially if you have a small opening, like you're drinking out of a straw, just try that. Breathe in through your mouth. You
Yeah.
can feel the air passing over your tongue is a little bit cool.
Yes.
Do you notice that?
I do
And it
notice that.
actually has an effect, right? It's very different feeling than breathing through your nose or just relaxed mouth breathing. It's really something that cools you down, that instantly calms down anger. It's specifically helpful in a situation where there's anger, whether it's somebody else's anger or your own anger. This cooling breath slows you down, calms you down, cools you down, right? There's the expression when somebody's angry, they're hot-headed, right?
Yes.
There's an
Yes.
association between anger
Yeah.
and heat. And that's why this cooling breath is part of calming down. And because emotions are contagious, if you're able to cool yourself down in these moments, you can be sure you might not make them calm down fully, but at least you're not exacerbating. You're not throwing fuel on the fire, right? Because that's exactly what can happen. Somebody starts losing their temper
Yes.
and we get triggered and we lose our temper and then it just
Yes.
escalates, right? So at least you're a neutral source, if not a calming source for the person that's angry. That's
Yeah.
the cooling breath.
So great. Yeah, just this impact of taking some deep breaths. And you talk about how even short, doing it for a couple of minutes,
Yep.
a minute
Yep.
actually makes a difference, which it does.
Yes.
And wherever you're nervous or something, walking into a meeting or a presentation, even a minute or two of box breathing,
Yep.
from the book, where just breathe in one nostril, hold it, breathe out the other nostril, hold the pause. So you
Hmm.
pause when you're empty. It's like a box. I pause when I
Right.
breathe in. I pause
In,
when
hold, out, hold.
exactly. Big difference, like an immediate difference before you're walking into, one of those tense situations. So
Exactly
you
right.
also mentioned in that also, and you brought it up here, the power of silence and just helping you kind of get emotionally stabilized, I think is huge. This power of
Oh,
taking a pause. And you bring,
yes.
I feel this all the time. You bring up how if you take a pause on stage or when you're doing a workshop, 7 seconds feels like a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I'm notorious for this. I'll ask a question and I'm expecting an answer in a second
Oh,
and
yeah. Give them a chance.
give them a chance. Not everybody's there, and so you've got to give them a chance to catch up. Let's
Yeah.
jump
And
over.
you get their attention back too, right? Because if all of a sudden you stop speaking, if somebody has zoned out and you stop speaking, they'll look up and say, "Oh, is it over?"
Yeah,
You get their attention back.
I'll be honest. I face that a lot, where I'm having this conversation, and it sounds like everything that I'm saying is super interesting to me. And then I'll ask a question, and somebody will literally go, "Did you just ask a question?" Because you talk about 88 keys, and we only use, on the piano, and with inflection, we're not using all of the different, inflection and tones and
Yeah.
pitches available to us that make conversation interesting.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I'll sneak a question in, then they go, "Did you ask a question?" They couldn't even follow it.
Right. Yeah. And it's what I say in the voice channel of the book is it's about taking responsibility for being heard.
Yeah,
It's making yourself not only understandable enough, but dynamic enough that, people are not used to focusing for a long time. We're in a society where things are always changing and flashing and moving and scrolling. So that means we have to be ready to change things up to get people's attention
I
back.
know. So hard today.
Right.
The attention spans are so short. A
Yeah.
fantastic book called, I'll come back to it. It'll be in the show notes. It's about the
Great.
lost attention and the attention spans on people
Oh,
right now.
yeah.
And it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
shocking.
I think I
It's
know.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, I've just had the fight or flight. There's no blood in my head right now. I can't find it.
I think I know the book you're talking about. I think I heard the author on a podcast recently. It sounded interesting.
Stolen Focus. The
Okay.
name of the book is called Stolen Focus.
Stolen focus.
Johann Hari. Apologies if we'll get the right one in the show notes, but it's Stolen Focus. See how taking a pause can allow you to get there? And Johann Hari, and it's just incredible. He tried to go on kind of a social media fast and a technology fast for a few months. And it was unbelievable what happened to him and what he
Okay.
recognized.
Oh, wow.
But just the fact that, given what goes on with all social media and the technology companies,
Yeah.
their whole model is based on trying to keep our eyes to the
Oh, yeah.
device. It's not to try and be helpful. It's the
No.
longer we have eyes to the device, the more money they make with advertising. And
Yeah.
so they've really built these models that kind of trigger things in our brain to
Yep.
keep us there. And by the way,
Yep.
it works beautifully.
Right, that's it. Like it's you have to appreciate the science. Well, you don't have to. I can appreciate the science behind, but I also know that I need to take responsibility for my own health and well-being. There's any number of things out there that are not good for me, and we can't go around and controlling the people to to
Yeah.
not offer tempting things that aren't good for us in life. We have to have the confidence to say, wait a minute. I noticed that I'm not feeling as good, speaking of confidence, after I've been scrolling for a while. Have you asked yourself, how do you feel after that compared to how you felt before? Do you have more confidence or less? And if the
Yeah.
answer is less, why do you keep going back? Only you can decide to, our mutual friend Dan Sullivan wrote a book about my attention is my asset or something. There's another book name we need to look up.
Yeah. He's got so many good books again. We'll
Yeah.
put the right ones in the show notes. Let's keep continuing on with the four channels. Second channel, the attitude channel. And
Hmm.
boy, lots of writing on this, the inner voice. We're
Yes.
trying to sabotage ourselves with our inner voice. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the most important one. My colleagues and I, my fellow coaches, we talk about how, you can do as many things on the outside or on the surface as you want to not sabotage yourself. But if you don't do the inner work, and if you don't do the inner work, then you can't master that inner voice. And the Four Channels book is really meant to be from the inside out and the outside in. It's like, let's throw everything we've got at this because it's
Hmm.
such an important topic, right? And let's not only dig down on the inside and ask ourselves, wait a minute, why do I beat myself up? Why do I tell myself that I can't do things, that I'm not good enough, or torment myself with these ruminations? But it's also like sometimes doing what they call I think it's called the process of the warrior. No, it's not process. One of my colleagues can help me remember. But it's about not only doing the inner work, but also talking the walk in a way, like doing these things where you're taking deep breaths, you're putting your shoulders back, that's the body, you're speaking with a louder voice, and kind of faking it till you make it in a way, right? Where you're
Yeah.
saying, look, I'm gonna tell my body, because we're always talking to ourselves. Our brain is talking to our body's talking to our brain all the time. So I'm going to do everything I can from the outside to
Yes.
instill confidence in myself. But that's not enough. We also have to deal with the attitude, and that's the inner part, the inner critic. And it's actually about the biggest message that I hope people take away is befriending it.
Hmm.
Really saying, I have this voice and it can be a real asset sometimes, and it's only there to protect me. Our inner critic loves the status quo, and it starts talking as soon as we want to step out of our comfort zone or try something
Yes.
new, or we did something different. That's usually when it gets the loudest. And it's like, it wants to keep us safe. Whatever
The
you've done up
amygdala.
until now hasn't killed you, so let's just keep doing that. God forbid you make changes. And if we recognize that and say, hey, thanks a lot, inner critic, and I don't need you this time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Recognizing it, noticing it, that's the first step.
Thank you, by the way. And jumping outside, the thing about jumping outside a comfort zone, and even something like Peloton has been so good, at least for me, coaching me on this is if you want to improve, you absolutely have to jump outside a comfort zone. So you're going to be uncomfortable.
Right.
So no matter what level of fitness you get to, if you want to improve while you're working out, there's a very uncomfortable part of that workout that
By
you want to
definition.
stop. And so what they try and help you with is there's this concept of getting a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Oh,
And they
very good.
graduate, and it's a good way of thinking of it.
Yep.
One trick I used to try and help myself with a long, long time ago was in the early days. when all of our friends were getting married, I was actually asked to be the MC at a bunch of different weddings, like almost every wedding I went to for 2 or 3 years, and everybody gets married at the same time. And I take it seriously because I don't want to ruin their wedding.
Yeah.
But you're stepping up, and in some cases, 200 people, 250 people, you get a little nervous. You got to prepare for it.
Sure.
And after a couple, I started thinking to myself, why am I doing this to myself? Why do I want to go to this wedding? In those days, I drank.
Enjoy it.
In those days, I
Yeah.
drank a lot. So I would
Okay.
have partied up with everybody else. And instead of having to be zoned in until I was done. And the way I kind of rationalized being uncomfortable was it made me be in the wedding even more. So because I
Mm,
had to interview the bridesmaids, I had to interview the groomsmen, I had to learn stories about everybody, the family. So I said, hey, this is uncomfortable, but I'm going to get comfortable with it because there's a benefit. I'm going to, know everybody more. I'm going to be more in the wedding and all that kind of stuff. Get
wonderful.
to learn from different people. So just this idea, I think it's helpful for people listening. There's going to be that presentation, there's going to be that keynote speech, there's going to be that, hey, maybe somebody's speaking at a wedding. You
Yeah.
rationalize why you're doing it, and instead of feeling nervous, you sort of feel like your butterflies are flying in formation. So
Great. And building on your strengths too. I mean, I think I can imagine you're a fantastic. I know exactly why those people asked you to MC their wedding. I'm sure you'd be
bad
just
judgment,
amazing with that.
bad
No,
judgment. That's
I mean, I've
why,
been
Margo.
anyone who's been in a room with you, Mark, especially in a room with lots of people, will know that you have an ability to have a laser-like focus, to bring a calm to the room, to acknowledge what's going on, to ask the good
Oh,
questions.
thank
So,
you for that. That's kind.
oh, not at all surprised. And what I hear you saying is you took it not only as an opportunity to step outside your comfort zone and get better, but also you took it as an opportunity to connect with these people, which is clearly something that's important to you and something that you're good at, right? And I think that's also, I don't think I mentioned that explicitly in the book, or if I did, probably not enough, is to find out what you love about any situation that makes you nervous or what you're already good at that makes you nervous. You know, I
Yeah.
just did that this morning. I was in a call with my team and we were doing a retro of a project that we led that was very stressful, very, a lot of work. There's so many last minute changes. It was really at a certain point, I was like, oh, why am I doing this? And I had to take responsibility because why were there so many changes? Because I didn't say no. I
Yeah.
just kept bending over backwards. And that's my strength. I have this ranger strength and the gallop strengths, which just like every strength, when taken to an extreme becomes a fault.
Right.
And rather
Right.
than just focus on dialing back my strength, like just don't be so much of an arranger, I thought maybe there's another strength that I have that I can put into play here that makes it easier to say no because I find that so hard, right? And that's about quality. That's a big value of mine, but also the relationship piece. Like build on the strength that I have to build relationships to make it easier to say no. And I think that could be a good rule of thumb for anybody who has to face a difficult situation and feels nervous.
Yeah. Focusing on the strengths, acknowledging your strengths, I think always very helpful for confidence. We're going to talk about one thing that isn't in the book at the end here, but let's finish, a quick discussion on the 4 channels. Now we're on channel 3. So we started with breath. We went
Yeah,
to attitude. Now we're on number 3, voice. We touched on
yeah.
it briefly, but
Hmm.
voice being a very powerful, aid in terms of confidence.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's really one of those where it's a lot about how you project yourself, how you, like I said before, take responsibility for being heard. It's
Hmm.
it's a channel that is like it can sabotage you. Like it needs to be there for people to get the whole picture of you as confident, which builds your confidence, right?
Yes.
So when people listen to you, when people say, "Hey, that was a great idea. Oh, let's do what Mark said, or let's do what Joanne said." It's like it's building your confidence. And when do they do that? They only do that when they can hear you, and they only do that when they can understand you. And so, learning how to make your voice not only the right volume, and I don't mean louder because sometimes people are too loud and people stop listening, but the
Yes.
correct, appropriate volume, a dynamic volume, but also concise enough. If you talk people, poor people, they're not capable of listening for that long. You need to be concise
Yes.
as well. And that's what builds the confidence, is actually the feedback that you get when you start to master that channel.
Well, by the way, I love that, Margo, taking responsibility for being heard, because that's an innate need in all of us, right? Outside of food and
Oh,
water, being heard is
big
one of the
time.
most important needs out there. And I think a lot of times when we're growing up and maybe early in our business careers, we don't have that confidence to take a room and to share our opinion and to step in or to disagree. Some of us are people pleasers, right?
Yeah.
Where hey, I don't want to have the, straight talk. I don't want to give the fundamental truth. I don't want to give feedback,
Hmm.
because
Especially if that makes you the only person in the room with that opinion.
yeah, exactly. So
Scary.
it does take some of that inner fortitude but taking responsibility for being heard, I think is really it's great life lessons, just generally a great life lesson.
Yeah. And sometimes it's as simple as waiting until people stop talking before you speak. Waiting
Yeah.
until they ask you a question, or saying, "Hey, I have a question," or I have an opinion here, before you just blurt out your golden question or your golden opinion. Make sure that people are they're looking at you and they're not talking themselves. I know that sounds basic, but you'd be shocked at how rare that is when you witness a meeting. People, when you watch debates, for example, it's just, yeah, can be
It's literally painful.
painful.
Yeah, and I've certainly been in those corporate environments for many a year where it was painful to see how a discussion would take place. And there was always this feeling that everybody had such a need to be heard that they couldn't hear anyone else because they're dying to figure out when they can jump in and share their thought.
Yeah. And why would somebody listen to you if you don't listen to them? And
I
that's part of
know.
taking responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. I always like this idea of whatever you want in life, give it away.
I love it. Yep.
Whatever you want. If I want somebody to hear me, listen to somebody else.
Totally.
If I want somebody to treat me with respect, give someone else respect. If I want somebody to acknowledge that, I'm good at what I do professionally, acknowledge and believe they're good at what they do professionally.
Totally. Totally.
Start
Make your
there.
own karma.
One real easy tactic we used to do when doing, I used to be running very large corporate meetings with lots of people with heavy personalities. One of the things we do as a matter of course was say at the end of the meeting, no matter what, we're going to do a round table and everybody gets the floor for 60 seconds. You can pass, but there's no debate or rebuttal.
Nice.
And so
Talking stick.
what people start to do is, we're in kind of a discussion. We're trying to keep things on track, and they didn't get their point in, but they veer away from going. Let me go back to something we were talking about 5 minutes ago. They just jot it down.
Mm.
And then at the end of the meeting, we go around the room and, somebody would say, you know what, Mark, you really wear terrible looking jackets. I don't want to see another one of those. I can't debate and jump in and go, hey, the salesman said he'd never seen this jacket look better on anybody. I can't jump in. So they get the floor with no rebuttal. And I think that's
Yeah.
just an easy tip, folks. When you run your next internal meeting this way, see what happens.
Yep.
Now we're moving on to, and I think it's the Wonder Woman, the Superman pose, Amy Edmondson,
Amy Cuddy.
Amy Cuddy. Sorry, I always get the Amy Cuddy. Amy Edmondson's psychological safety kind of rolls into
Yes.
the Amy's. But the fourth channel is the body channel.
Mhm.
Let's talk and share a
Exactly.
couple of tips there, Margo.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it was Amy Cuddy, and I understand a lot of her colleagues as well, right? I think she gets all the credit, which is great.
Okay.
She certainly deserves it, but I think that there's a whole group of people who are doing some fantastic work, and it's, and now that's a bit of a sidebar, but it's one of those things where later years people tried to redo the experiment and it didn't work quite right, and then so they wanted to throw the whole thing in the garbage.
Yeah.
And it pains me, and this is the sidebar, how often it's the case when people start to get notoriety or status or power or money or anything else, we just lose all empathy for them and we start just cutting holes and criticizing. So just want to say, I think it's a great work. And I understand there's a critique, and some people say, oh, in the second edition, you're going to take that out now, right? So no,
Mm,
absolutely not. I think it's fantastic. And how do I know it works? Well, because I've tried it and it works on myself. N of one, but I'm sharing what works for me. I'm not saying this
yeah.
is, the only way, but I'm sharing in the book what works for me. So I think it's fantastic work, and it's very logical anyway if you think about it, because as we were saying before, the body and the brain are always in communication. And the brain is always on the lookout for threats or rewards, much more focused on the threats, of course, because especially in caveman times, the threats are more important. You need to at least stay alive. And then rewards, well, they're nice, but we better stay alive first, right? So that's also why when you get feedback, you have 99 pieces of good feedback and one bad one, and you focus on the bad one. That's
Exactly right.
similar. Our brain it has shaped like that, and let's
Yep.
accept that and embrace it, because it's gotten us to where it has. So a lot of it is really logical. She was saying taking up space. If you think about animals in the animal kingdom, what do they do when they have to go, take over territory or fight, or so they make themselves large? And what you're telling your brain when you do that is you're strong. You're powerful. You don't need to hide. Like, you're going to be okay if you're seen. And the opposite, when you make yourself small and you're like, what do you do if somebody, God forbid, you're in a place where there was gunfire happening? You would make yourself as small as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And that tells your brain, threat, 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 making myself small. And one of the points she makes in the TED Talk that got so famous is, unfortunately, we do this all the time without realizing it. We're huddled over our phones, sitting on the train. We're making ourselves small without even realizing it. We're sending a message to our brain that you're not strong, you're not confident, there's a threat, there's danger, and so we're not at our best. So it's really a question of, and it doesn't mean you have to be big, or even the Wonder Woman. It's about being neutral. Are you, especially if you're in one of those difficult meetings where you feel nervous, where you don't have all your confidence, are your feet flat on the floor? Are
Nice.
you sitting up straight? Because
Yes.
if you're like a little bit off, especially if you're standing on stage, I can't tell you how often I see, and this is definitely more women than men, standing on stage. You can't see now, but I have my feet crossed
Okay.
like
And
this on stage,
leaning on a podium or something.
or just freestanding. For some reason, they feel the need to put their feet opposite,
Oh,
and
wow.
you kind of do this. And what happens when you do that? Or, I mean, maybe not so much, but they'll just, you see people cross. You can't see me doing it now, but they stand like this, one
Yeah.
foot across. And the problem with that is, if you get pushed, it's a lot easier to fall over. If you push me the same way when I have both feet on the floor, I don't move. And I know you're not going to actually probably get physically pushed when you're
Of
on
course.
stage,
Some of
but
our meetings that in the funnel, that'll happen, but
it might happen.
we're trying to cut that out.
We're trying to make a law against that.
Yeah.
But still, I believe psychologically there's something, you just feel
Yeah.
stronger if you're both feet flat on the floor, planted on the ground. Just do everything you can to not feel off balance, right? You might as
Yeah.
well. Just standing up straight, both feet flat on the floor. And by the way, that makes it easier to breathe.
Oh, nice too. Yes.
These the channels help each other, right? So speaking slowly, taking a deep breath between sentences. I don't need to talk in a continuous flow. I can really pause like I'm doing now and have a little breath here and there in between my
Yes.
sentences. It's not disturbing, but I'm able to keep the oxygen flowing. That's unfortunately in the Amy Cuddy video. I think she hadn't gotten the Four Channels book yet, because she's a little bit out of breath, but that's okay. I think it's still really great work.
It was, and also that was early days of TED Talks.
Of
So that's
course,
when
of
you know
course,
gazillions of people now. Everybody's done. It's different now because there's different levels.
and super polished also.
Yeah. Listen, first of all, the four channels of confidence: how to cultivate and radiate self-assurance. Gang, this is a great book. So as everybody knows, we put people on the podcast because I've read their book and I liked it. This
Thank
is a
you.
really great book. Those four channels: breath, attitude, voice, body. They're all interdependent and connected, of course. Many of these things play over, but these are things where we can intentionally help and protect our confidence, which is so critical in business and in life. I'm pretty sure after today, Margo, lots more people are gonna look to learn more about you and your coaching business. How do they find out more about you?
I think the best way is LinkedIn. That's the social media channel. For my confidence, I decided I don't want to be on a million different social media channels. I'm going to choose one, and I've chosen LinkedIn. Of course, our website as well, coachingwithoutborders.com. And the book is available on Amazon, and you hopefully will find it right away when you type 4 channels. But if not, 4 channels of confidence is definitely going to get you there.
Fantastic. And that's, again, on LinkedIn, Margo McClimans, M little C, large C's, McClimans. Mm-hmm. And Margo, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Just great to meet you. Great to read the book. I'm so glad we have this conversation.
Thanks, Mike. I have to tell you, every time I talk to you, it's just such a joy. Mark, thanks. You were so generous. I can tell the world that we had a conversation also with one of my colleagues, and you were just immediately sharing all sorts of great tips and wisdom and insight. And it was just a bit of a get to know. And yeah, you're just a walking treasure trove of wisdom and generosity. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. That's what a lovely thing to say. Those editing the podcast, if you could turn Margo's voice up for that part of it, and actually
keep that part in.
Yeah, let's start, and in the middle and at the end of the podcast, just edit that in. Thank you again, Margo. Great to connect with you. We're going to be speaking lots more, I'm sure.
I hope so.
And team, thank you for joining our podcast today. So if you like today's podcast, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast, because that really matters to us. That's actually how we get great guests like Margo McClimans today. Now, also, if there's things we can be doing in this podcast to make it even more valuable to you, I really want to know what that is. And you can send your ideas to Mark Cox at inthefunnel.com, Mark Cox at inthefunnel.com. That's actually my personal email for the company, and I respond to every email we get where people suggest ideas for the podcast, and we love constructive criticism. So please keep those ideas coming. We've applied some of those things that you've been gracious enough to share, but please keep it coming. Thanks again for joining everybody today, and we'll see you next time on the Selling Well podcast.